Hey everybody, here today with a very good friend of mine. He's a minister, he's a lawyer, he's an author, and I think of him as one of the upcoming stars in the Enneagram world, Hunter Mobley. And it's good to have him here. Happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter. I'm grateful to be here. Glad we can be together, even though we're social distancing a little bit. Just glad to be here talking Enneagram.
We're trying to keep our distance here on the stage, but Hunter, we're living in some crazy times.
Absolutely.
Things we've never really seen or been through before with COVID-19 and all of the regulations and the stress that's going on, and so I thought, we would just have a dialogue. You're so knowledgeable about the Enneagram and personality types, but what are your thoughts just about what we're going through as a culture and as a society right now?
Absolutely, Clay. I think, honestly, this kind of a season is one of the most important seasons for us to use tools like the Enneagram to just kind of check in with ourselves and to see how are we doing, because this is a strange season. It's a tricky season. It's a season where we're out of course, our normal routines and our normal patterns of how we all kind of live and protect ourselves and take care of ourselves. So one of the great things about the Enneagram tool is that it describes personality to us mainly as a way to kind of check and see, is our personality too big? Is it taking over? Is it healthy? Is it helping us or is it hurting us? And in a season like this where we're just kind of all rattled a little bit, and we've got some anxiety that's different than the anxiety that we usually carry. Personality can actually, in these seasons, take over a little bit more than usual because we've got some kind of fewer defense mechanism, fewer kind of things to just distract us. And so we have to really, I think, evaluate and see how we're doing in our personalities in these seasons. Some of us, as you know with Enneagram, some of us are kind of more oriented to a season like this of tamping down, doing less, shutting down a little bit, and some of us, it's really disconcerting and really disorienting. So this is just an important time, I think, to be thinking about the Enneagram and letting it help us in this season.
Yeah, think about that. So I'm more of an extrovert. It's been really hard on me to not be around people. My wife is, she's more of an introvert, so she's like, oh, hunker down, I got this,
Right.
I can handle this. And I'm like, let's have people over and just keep them all 8 feet apart, it'll be just fine. But we're not supposed to be doing that. Well, the Enneagram has really kind of surged in popularity in recent years. So could you just kind of give those that are still trying to wrap their head around it just a quick overview?
Absolutely.
And then let's kind of talk through the numbers and how they might be playing out during a stressful time.
Absolutely.
Give us an overview snapshot of what is the Enneagram and how should people approach it and understand it?
Absolutely. So the Enneagram is a personality tool that describes 9 different personality types that ultimately represent 9 different ways of seeing, of processing life, and of responding to the world. So I love Henry Now, and he was self-identified too on the Enneagram, and he talked about it as a distinction between your relevant self, which is your personality or your Enneagram number, and that relevant self is the self that does things and proves things and builds things and accomplishes things. But behind our relevant selves, behind our personalities and our Enneagram numbers, we have a deeper, truer self. We have a soul. We have a Christ in you and a Christ in me, something that gets covered up a little bit by all of these relevant selves that are active and busy. So we use the Enneagram to say, what are these 9 different relevant selves? Which one fits me the best so that I can take analysis of it, see how it's helping me, see if it's actually paving a way for me to get back in touch with my deeper, truer Christ in you, Christ in me self, or whether it's blocking the way. And so the Enneagram is not mostly about behavior, it's about what motivates us, right? Behind each of these 9 relevant selves, there's woundings and longings and desires and revelations. And we talk a lot about the wounds as kind of what describes each of these numbers. So each of the 9 types carries a childhood wound, which is always kind of strange to talk about, right? You
Right.
know, how were we wounded in childhood?
Yeah, well, what's my baggage from the
Yeah.
past, and how is it affecting my life today?
But we all kind of pick up some message in childhood that just sticks to us and then plays out in the ways that we live and the ways that we respond. And so if we just quickly look at those 9 Enneagram wounds as one way of just kind of painting a picture for how different these 9 different personality types are. If we start with ones, we've got a wound that says, you should be perfect and you shouldn't make mistakes. And if you're going to be loved, it's going to be because you have met the mark and risen to the standard and done things the right way all the time. That's a tough wound to carry.
And ones are often called perfectionists,
Absolutely.
even though I know you use the
Absolutely.
numbers, but ones are called perfectionists.
They are, because they respond to that wound by trying as hard as they can to be perfect, to perfect things, and in a way also to perfect others around them. But then 2s have a wound that says, if you're going to be loved, it's going to be because you were helpful to all the people around you and didn't demand too much for yourself. So 2s have kind of spent, sometimes they're called the helper or the giver,
the helper.
because they've spent a lifetime kind of pushing down their own needs and over-identifying with the needs of people around them in order to sort of find place and love and belonging through the relationships that they're in.
So 2s will neglect their essential needs because they're so focused on, here's how I'm going to help the other people in my life, and they can clearly go overboard with that. But they do feel called to help, and they find meaning in helping.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then you've got 3s that their childhood wound says, if you're going to be loved, it's going to be because you wowed us with your successes and your accomplishments. So 3s are kind of responding to the world by adapting and flexing all the time. 3s are able to come into any environment, discover pretty quickly what they need to do to be successful in that context, and they will do it. So they're leading, they are taking charge, they are accomplishing, and they are adapting all the time. And so that's kind of a wound that 3s carry.
And a lot of times 3s, they feel like kind of they are what they accomplish.
Absolutely.
They equate their meaning to their success. I'm going to do this, and they're driven, and they can fit in all kinds of different contexts, and they're achievers.
Yes,
they're
they
often
are.
called achievers.
They are, and they achieve a lot. And I'll say one thing about 3s in this kind of time that's important to know. This work from home time for 3s, it's trickier for 3s than it is for any other number, because 3s don't often know when it's okay to work and not work. And so if everything is happening in the same context, I often counsel 3s. It's not great for 3s to work from home, in normal circumstances, because 3s need some boundaries imposed on them. So I think 3s, especially as achievers in this season, sometimes it's hard to know when is enough achieving enough.
Right.
When am I able to be off?
So 3s would usually say, okay, I'm going to work, or I'm going to this meeting, I'm going out to accomplish this. But now with work and home being the same, the lines are very blurred.
The lines are blurred.
And they have a hard time turning it off. All right, what about 4s?
So 4s have a wound that says the world just simply doesn't have enough room for your complicated, diverse, and changing feelings. 4s have a lot of feelings, Clay. They have more feelings than the rest of us. Sometimes they have feelings that the rest of us experience over 2 or 3 weeks. 4s have that same diversity of feelings in 20 minutes. Wow. And so it's hard sometimes for 4s to know which feelings should I attach to. When they feel high highs, they like that, and they want it to be higher. When there's low lows, that's not uncharted territory for them, and they can sit there. They can rest in that low low. So 4s have a wide diversity of feeling. They're an introspective number. They're an interior-focused number. They have rich, textured, layered stories. That's part of just what makes them up. That's part of what their gift of taking us all to great beauty and leading us to see texture and layers everywhere.
But don't 4s also kind of feel like, nobody really understands me? I mean, I'm so deep and unique, but nobody really understands me. But also they're kind of thinking, I don't want people to understand me. I mean, when it comes down to it, right?
Right. It's kind of a cycle that 4s can get in because they have so many feelings. They always feel like that people around them, even people that love them the most, have always kind of said, hey, could you just turn that down a little bit?
Yeah.
Could you just be a little bit less extra? And so that's made them feel kind of unseen and out of step with everyone else. And so the tricky thing for fours is they sort of envy the normalcy that the rest of people kind of get to experience, they think, but they also don't really want to be normal because normal sounds so square. So it's a little bit of
unique.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a vicious cycle. But I will say, fours sometimes tell me, I don't really feel unique as much as I feel a little bit offbeat. And so the existential struggle for fours is real.
So fives, often called the investigator,
Yes.
very cerebral,
Absolutely.
very kind of. Their fives are probably doing pretty well right now.
Absolutely.
Because they like to read and kind of hunker away, and they're like, okay, hide away for a few weeks. I got this, right? That fives would probably say that.
They do. I would say that fives are one of the numbers that have some of the easiest access points to ramping down. The only thing is, for the fives that live in a full, busy house, everybody else being in the house all the time too with them really drains on their energy because fives have a managed set of energy. Because the wound that fives carry is a wound that says, don't be too comfortable in the world because the universe is not abundant and resources are scarce, and so you better learn how to kind of preserve and ration and hoard the few limited resources that you have. And so one of those main resources that fives are kind of rationing is time and energy. And so if they're able to kind of get good, quiet time by themselves at home during this season, they're probably doing okay so far. But if their house is full of kids and family members that usually are gone at school or at work during the day.
Lots of interruptions that they're not used to and that they don't necessarily adapt well to.
Absolutely. That can be tricky for fives.
All right.
Yeah.
Sixes, the loyalists. These
Absolutely.
are the worst case scenario thinkers. These are the folks that already wrestle with kind of fear and anxiety in the first place. And so it's probably been ratcheted up, I would assume.
So it has for some sixes. The wound that sixes carry says, the world is full of danger, and I probably shouldn't trust myself to make it through that danger on my own. I should probably find some people who are, quote, stronger than me, or some institutions or systems of belief to help navigate me through the world's dangers. But the interesting thing about sixes is they do spend their lives kind of touching anxiety all the time and making worst case scenario plans for things that could happen or could go wrong. But when the real crisis hits, sixes are ready because they have thought about it. They've planned for it. They've gotten ready for it before they needed to get ready for it. So I'm finding that the sixes that I'm talking to during this season of kind of global pandemic, they are strangely calm because for sixes, they spend their lifetime feeling like they're alone on the watchtower, like nobody else is worried or cares the way that they do.
Right.
But as soon as people collectively start to turn their attention toward problems, sixes feel like they can kind of let their guard down a little bit because they're not the only ones making plans and getting ready.
So would you say sixes were already thinking about there could be a health pandemic?
Absolutely.
So some of them have already processed that, and now it's like their worst case scenario came to pass.
They have, and in some ways, they almost feel a little bit justified. Like, see what we've been kind of talking about or thinking about. So sixes, when you come to the real crisis, like what we're in now, sixes are the ones to rely on because they're steady, they're cool in crisis, they're prepared, and they have plans that the rest of us just never made or thought to make.
All right, let's talk about the sevens. They're often called the enthusiasts.
Right.
Every day is a snow day, one adventure to the next.
Absolutely.
They probably are having a hard time being
tricky.
locked down right now.
They are. This is a particularly tricky time for sevens because sevens carry a wound that says don't depend on anybody for anything, which means that sevens are really concerned with being trapped in pain, trapped in limitation. Sevens want options. They want freedom. It doesn't mean that they need to be busy all the time, but it means that they need to know that if they wanted to be busy, they could be. So now that sevens can't travel or go to restaurants or try new things or have all the adventures that they normally would want to do, sevens feel limited and it feels very trapping, and sevens have a lot of pent-up energy. I encountered a seven yesterday who brought me several kind of quilted masks that she's just making masks all the time, but she needs something to put this pent-up energy into.
So getting creative at home,
Absolutely.
coming up with adventurous things to do at the house, and so for sevens, probably being able to get out in the yard and get out in
Yes.
in the neighborhood is really important because they feel trapped.
They feel trapped, and sevens don't want to be trapped, especially in pain or especially in anxiety. So then we got eights, the best number, right?
The best number. A healthy 8 is a good number.
It is.
Give us an overview of 8.
Yeah, so eights have this wounding message that says everybody in your life is capable of betraying you, which means that you better be kind of tough and not give your trust away too quickly. You better make yourself kind of impenetrable to vulnerability and sort of keep good boundaries between you and other people so that people can't invade those boundaries and betray you or risk that trust in some way. And so eights are having a little bit of the trouble that 3s and 7s are having during this season, because eights are active and they're doers and they want to be productive. Eights don't always know sometimes when to turn off or turn on too.
Right.
So the kind of working from home, are we always working? When do we stop? What are the boundaries? Mm-hmm. That can be a tricky thing for eights too. Eights have the most energy on the Enneagram too.
Right.
So again, this is a season where everybody's kind of being asked to like turn the collective energy down.
Right.
And so eights are needing to find ways to healthily exert and express and kind of live out some of that energy that just lives inside of them.
Which is hard when you're holed up and you're in your house. And the true story, Hunter knows I'm an 8, and Hunter's helped me over the years think about how I could be a healthy 8. But a couple days ago, I went to pick up some steaks at the Sperry's Mercantile to grill out, and my son Clayton said, "Dad, would you get some of their peppermint ice cream?" Well, the first time I went by, they didn't have any. A few days ago, I went by and they had a bunch of it. So I bought 5 of those peppermint ice cream cartons just so we'd have it, while we're locked down. And I got home and my wife was like, "Really? You bought 5? Do we need 5 of them?" But bottom line is 8s have a tendency to overdo it.
Absolutely.
They can overeat, they can overdrink,
Sure.
they can overexercise.
Yeah.
And so they can take things to the extreme, especially when they're stressed.
Absolutely. And I think that's due to the fact that one of the blessings of 8s is that 8s do have more energy than a lot of the other numbers, and feel like that some of their output and energy and capacity is unlimited, which means that 8s haven't done as much investigation as the other numbers as to what really are the limits for me. Where should I really put a stop or put the boundaries up for myself and not just keep going, keep charging?
All right, let's talk about 9s, the peacemakers.
Absolutely.
Give us a snapshot of the 9s.
Yeah, so 9s have this wounding message that says, you better just kind of go along and get along, not take up too much space for yourself in the world, because I'm really not sure that your presence matters in this relationship, in this family, in this community. So if you could just kind of minimize your presence a little bit, go along, get along, make peace, keep the peace, not rattle the situation too much, then everything will go well. And so 9s are a number that actually has some good pathways in quarantine, because 9s are good at turning off and at doing less and at kind of staying in. So that's great for 9s. They're having some of the same trouble as 5s if they've got a house full of people that aren't always there.
Right.
9s need time away. They need time alone. But this is a time where actually we can learn some things from 9s about how to be content doing less, because that's one of their good, holy pathways, is to sometimes lean into less can sometimes be more.
Right.
And that's something that all of us can learn from 9s.
And if there's any tension in the family or in the marriage, or then 9s really feel called to deal with it and to smooth it out.
Yeah.
They have a hard time living with that because that's uncomfortable for them.
It's really uncomfortable. Conflict feels very disorienting to nines. And so one of the biggest spiritual pathways that we always talk about for nines is just remembering and inhabiting the idea that the absence of conflict does not always mean the presence of peace. Sometimes and often, it actually takes some conflict to broker a lasting peace. And so nines do have to watch in these kind of seasons where maybe they're at home with family, spending a little bit more time in everybody's face than we're used to.
Right.
Nines have to watch how much they are giving up of themselves in that and kind of just shrinking back and going along and getting along, and when they actually need to rise up and make sure that their needs are taken care of and that their needs are put to the forefront too.
Because nines are a little bit like twos in that they will think about everybody else and taking care of everybody else and helping everybody else get along, but they need time to themselves as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so we're in the middle of this pandemic. We really don't know how long this is going to last. I mean, this is, we've just celebrated Easter, and it's been really bizarre to have Easter in an empty sanctuary and to go to church on the computer. But let's go back through the numbers and really hone in on, what does each number need to pay attention to during this time of stress, because this is a stressful time, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of anxiety, and everybody, this is the beauty of the Enneagram, every personality, everybody handles this type of situation differently. Some handle it better than others. You said sixes are probably, doing okay, but let's go back through the numbers and just talk about how do you see these numbers kind of dealing with stress, and what do they need to watch out for or kind of have on their radar as we continue to go through this uncharted time period?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Clay. So the first thing before we even kind of talk about the numbers is just to say the Enneagram is dynamic. It's not static, right? And so one of the things that's represented in the Enneagram figure, if you've seen it or Google it right now, maybe just to look at what it looks like, is there's these lines running between the numbers. Those lines represent movement that we make from our own core number toward other numbers in times of stress and in times of security. So if you look at the Enneagram image, if you just find it on your phone or on your computer, you can trace those movements from your core number by looking at your core number, whatever your number is. I'm a 2, Clay's an 8. If you look at your core number and you find the line that's going away from your number with kind of an arrow pointing away from your number, that's the place you go to in times of stress to get some extra behaviors. If you look at the line with the arrow coming toward your core number, that's the line that you're moving toward in times of security. And so here's the thing I want to say about this. Obviously, we're in stress. I mean, we just are in stress, collective, global stress, which is bigger of a thing than just individual stress, because it means that our own individual stress is kind of in an unseen way doubled or tripled by just collective free-floating stress that is just sitting in our world right now.
Right.
So we've got to think about that move in stress. But I also think it's really important for us to think about that move in security, because we make that move in times of security when we're in the grooves and the ruts of life. So the security move is not just about being on vacation or having the best day. It's your favorite day that you've had in a long time.
Right.
You can access that security move when you're just kind of in the ruts and the groove of life. And a lot of us that are just, we're kind of doing less, we're home more, we're in the ruts and the groove a lot too. So what that means is we are actually traveling more than we know from our core number toward both our stress and security number, grabbing up some behaviors from those other numbers and bringing them back to our behavior in our core number. What that means is we've got to really know what of those behaviors are we grabbing up that are helpful, and what are actually unhelpful and are kind of hurting us and exacerbating this stressful, odd, unprecedented
And
situation.
it's really a stress that we can't avoid. I mean, you can't
it's
run
just
from
here.
it. It's
Right.
here, and so everybody's dealing with it. Every number's dealing with it. Every person's dealing with it. All right, so talk about the
Yeah.
ones. What do the ones need to pay attention to and think about during this pandemic?
Absolutely. Well, first I need to say that ones, a tricky thing for them is home is tough for ones because home represents responsibility. Home represents outcomes, responsibility, things that need to be done, undone things. So ones, you just have to know you are going to be wired to feel like you're supposed to maximize quarantine. You're supposed to be the best homeschool parent.
Right.
You're supposed to get the whole house in order. You're supposed to keep everyone on a routine. You're supposed to keep yourself disciplined and on routine. And ones, you have an invitation in this to let some of that go and to realize there is no script for doing quarantine perfectly. There is no perfect in this. And perfect or good for you as ones may mean doing less than normally you would do. It may mean letting some things go undone.
Because ones are always making lists, right?
They
And then
are.
when they realize I'm going to be stuck at home for a while, they're going to make another list and they're going to keep going down that list and checking off tasks.
It is.
And it's really hard for them to turn it off and to relax because there's always more to do.
Absolutely. And I'll say ones are really helped by nature. So ones, y'all are a number, and I guess this is okay to do at the moment, but it's still okay to go for a hike or go for a walk, get in your car, drive the Natchez Trace Parkway, drive somewhere beautiful, because ones, when you get out of the home, you feel a little lighter, feel a little freer, and you can be reinvigorated by nature. Because if ones sit in their living room, it's hard for them to just rest because they see that picture that needs to be straightened. They see that pile that's been there too long. They know that there's a drawer over here that probably could be reorganized. And so ones just have to know being at home and being responsible. Ones feel like they're responsible
Right.
for their families and for their kids' educations.
And they have a hard time with everybody else who's not responsible.
Absolutely.
Because it looks like everybody else is enjoying themselves, and ones are like, we got things to do.
Right.
We got to get this stuff done.
Right. So just remember, ones, perfection's not the goal. Goodness to yourself and goodness to all the people that you love and live with in this is the goal, which probably means doing less than you think you need to be doing.
All right, let's talk about twos. What do the helpers need to have on their radar during this time?
Well, this is tricky for twos because twos are usually so externalized that they're out of touch with their own kind of feelings and emotions, but there's not as many people to over-identify with right now. Twos don't have as many focuses for their attention and their energy and their helpfulness. And so twos are left, which is a good thing, with themselves a little bit more to actually confront their own fears and anxiety and feelings. So twos, this is a time to really pay attention to your feelings. How are you doing in this? There's not as many people for you to check in on, or there's not as many escapes or kind of workarounds to your own feelings in this as you usually find. And so check in with yourself every day. Get the feeling chart out, Google a feeling chart, and check in with yourself a few times a day to really understand, what are you feeling? Where's this showing up in your body? How are you doing with this? Twos, you feel unproductive right now because there's not as much to do. There's not as many relationships to go after. So this can be a beautiful season for twos to do a little bit less, focus on yourself, do some goal setting for yourself, take your own interest and dreams into priority, sometimes for the first time.
Yeah.
And let your needs and your interests drive your energy in this time.
And so twos are probably sitting back and they see a lot of need and a
Yeah.
lot of things that they could do, but they can't actually go do it because they're supposed to stay at home. They're
Yeah.
supposed to not be around people.
Yeah.
So it's not that they still have that natural inclination to go help, but right now they really can't help.
Right.
And so things like making masks from home,
Yeah.
they have to be creative in terms of how they help.
Absolutely. And I would just say this is a season for twos to get back in touch with yourselves and your own goals and needs a little bit more. It's a good season of slowing down and stopping for that for twos.
All right, what about the threes, the achievers? What
Yeah.
should they be thinking about during the quarantine time?
Threes really need to set up some routines and boundaries for themselves in this time because, again, I know a lot of threes feel like, okay, quarantine. That means it's time for me to finish my book, get a podcast started, work on my next work project, get a head start on blah, blah, blah. And so threes, the temptation is to overdo during this time and to not attend to just your own feelings and your own needs and the family maybe that's just right around you in the home. So threes, you've got to put up some good routines and patterns and boundaries for you to know when is enough, when can you be at work and when can you not be working. That's something really important for you to ask threes. And threes, if your impulse right now is to just start new things, be efficient, get that book written, get that podcast started, do all the things, that's beautiful when it's in moderation, but it can also stop you from learning and paying attention to the things that are really happening in yourself that we can pay attention to in this time.
So I'd say threes probably have a real hard time with the economy shutting down, with business as usual kind of being put on hold, because they're used to going and doing and knocking things out.
Absolutely.
And doing it on a high level.
Absolutely. And always having a goal, because threes always want to have a goal. And it's kind of unclear sometimes what our goals are right now. It's like, because we don't know when this is going to end. We don't know when we're going to get back to normal patterns. So just give yourself permission, threes, to not have a goal for a minute. You're going to have some goals in this, but give yourself permission to not just make endless goals for yourself, to know when this is over, you can get back to some of that. But this is a good time for you as threes to rest a little bit more than you usually do.
It's probably really hard for threes to not have an end date in mind.
It is.
If the goalpost keeps getting moved.
Exactly.
And they're getting kind of wired to, we're going to go back, here we go, and then they move the time again. That's tough for threes.
It is. It really is.
All right, talk about fours.
This is an interesting season for fours because they are an interior-oriented number. They can be okay sometimes at home. They can be okay sometimes with less activity because they have a rich interior life. They have a rich imagination. They have rich interest that can be done through reading or through art or through film or through TV, things that you can do at home. So those are some beautiful pathways to fours. But fours are a relationship number. So fours are always kind of yearning for meaning and belonging and love found in relationships. So even though fours can do okay sometimes isolating and drawing on their own creativity and inner strength, fours also, too much of that can make fours feel really out of step and really unsettled and kind of unseen and untethered in relationship. So for fours in this time, this is a good time for you to actually be leaning into some relationships. Fours, whereas I'm going to say for maybe twos, stop checking in with everybody, check in with yourself. Fours, this is actually a good time to check in with people, to reach outside, to remind yourself that you're not truly alone. We still have phones, we still have Zoom, we still have some of these kind of external communication means, and those are good for you to do, fours, to remember that there's a story that's happening around you that's bigger than just your own story, that you're not actually isolated, that you're still part of a community and a family and a group. And so fours, I'm going to encourage you during this season of less to actually do a little bit more externalizing and checking in.
Okay, so let's move on to the fives, the investigators. What should they be thinking about during a stressful time of quarantine?
So the tricky thing for fives is that fives are always thinking, of course. They're always gathering up information and research. But that can also become too much, especially in this time, because, man, there's so much stuff to digest right now about all the info and all the research and all the what could be's and when's.
So fives are they've read up on coronavirus. They've read up on the charts and the curves and the graphs and the numbers and they've analyzed it over and over again.
They've got a lot of research, but here's the thing, fives can stand behind that research and that can inhibit them from actually moving from the head into the heart and into the body. So fives, I'm going to tell you during quarantine, this is really important for you to focus on matters of the heart and matters of the body. You've got the head down. You've got a lot of the research. You've got a lot of the stuff. You've got a lot of information at your disposal. But remember that things that happen in the head are no substitute for things that happen in the heart. So just like I said for 4s, this is a time for you 5s to make sure that you are also connecting through the heart and through the body with other people as well, and not just kind of lost in your head, because 5s are an anxiety number. They're in that fear grouping of numbers with 6s and 7s. And so too much information and research can really ramp up the fear and the anxiety for 5s. And the antidote to that is getting outside of the head into the heart and into the body. So nature is great for you 5s right now. Hikes are great for you 5s. Checking in with feelings is great for you 5s.
That's good. And 5s, probably they're always watching their energy,
Absolutely.
but there's a good chance that their energy is going down even faster than what they're used to.
It is, because external mental stress takes energy, and we've got a lot of external mental stress right now. Just worrying about, am I going to get sick? What would it feel like how would I know if I'm sick? What would I do? That takes a lot of energy, and so 5s, this is a time to kind of fill yourself up with some energy that doesn't just come from research in the life of the mind, but fill yourself up with some energy that comes from doing, taking action, getting out in the garden, digging in dirt.
Right. All right, what advice do you have for the 6s, the Loyalists?
Yeah. 6s have some of the same problems as 2s during the season, because 6s like to be together. Right. It's killing 6s that we couldn't be together for Easter, that we couldn't get our families together like we usually do. And so 6s feel a little discombobulated by just kind of the isolation of this season. And so 6s are also going to be doing some checking in, with us all, and that's good and that's great for you 6s. But just know, 6s, that you are the number that still keeps us all together and holds us together. We still love you for that and depend on you for that. And there's a lot of ways that you can still hold us together as communities, and 6s are doing that. But because you are the principal anxiety number, you have to really watch in these kind of seasons. Check in with yourself about, how are you doing with your anxiety? Are you doing okay? Has it taken over? If it has taken over, that's a good clue for you to get back into community in some way, because when 6s are isolated, 6s feel more anxious. When 6s are in a group or in community, 6s feel less anxious.
So I got a sister-in-law that's a 6, and so she and my brother have a 3-month-old baby, and so she's been sending lots of videos of my niece, because it's probably hard for the family not to be there to watch this baby progress through every stage. And I had never thought about that 6s, when they're more alone, that actually ramps up their anxiety, that they do better kind of in a system.
They do.
That's interesting.
And I just think the last thing with 6s is we also have to remember, the caricature of 6s is that 6s are afraid or they're anxious. But we really have to remember, when the rubber meets the road and the bad thing happens, 6s are more ready than the rest of us.
Yeah, so like if you need toilet paper, you want to go to a 6's house.
They know where to go. They can tell you where to get it.
They were stocking up before this thing ever took off. Right?
They were. So we can rely on 6s in these times.
All right, talk to the 7s. How should they approach things right now?
7s, I want to just say, you're one of the hardest numbers in this season, and so I want you to be extra good to yourself, because this is really tough for you, to be trapped, to be limited, to feel like there's no end in sight. And so 7s, you just got to know you're going to have to find healthy ways to expel energy and healthy ways to expel the sense of trappedness. But 7s, you know that you have a lot of unhealthy ways too sometimes, where you can expel energy and get away from the trappedness. So 7s, you got to really watch yourself and recognize what is kind of healthy doing and activity and energy and adventure, and what is actually harmful doing and energy and activity in this season. So if you can, make masks like my friend Jessica's doing right now, if you can try out some new recipes, if you can have a few adventures around the home, take on some new projects, take up a hobby that may be new and may be kind of strange. Those are good, healthy ways to expel some of that energy, not feel so limited in this time. But if you're watching yourself return to some of the kind of numbing strategies or some of the more addictive-oriented things that you've picked up some in your past, be careful about that and just watch that. Know yourself in this time because it's a triggering time, especially for sevens.
All right, talk to the eights.
Eights.
How should we be acting, thinking, processing during the rest of this pandemic?
Absolutely.
Quarantine?
Well, you know, because eights are natural born leaders and eights are take charge kind of folks, this feels like an unproductive time for eights too. And so eights feel a little bit kind of existentially stalled of like, am I doing enough? Am I not doing enough? What do I need to do? So eights, I'm going to have some of the same advice as I have for ones and threes for you, that this is a time where it's okay to do less. This is a time where it's okay to not have big lofty goals, to not conquer the world, to not think, have I maximized this? Because your orientation is going to be, have I maximized this? Have I confronted this with all of my energy and enthusiasm? And there is no way to master this. There is no way to maximize this to its fullest. For you eights, this is a good time to sort of ramp down a little bit, rest. Remember, you do have so much energy, but that energy can get you in trouble because you don't always know what it ends. So this is a great moment to just let yourself recharge those energy tanks, do less, access that 5 place of a little bit more withdrawal, a little bit more less. That's a good thing for eights in this season, to not feel like this has got to be as productive of a season as usually they are.
Well, that's interesting because eights go to 5 when they're stressed.
They do.
But what you're saying is that perhaps in this time, that's okay.
It is.
More 5 behavior patterns that keep you from trying to conquer the world.
It is.
And we have to come to terms with the fact that this is out of our control. We can't control
and that's tricky for eights. Eights are feeling, and it's like there's nobody to blame, right? So it's this existential kind of out of control that eights feel where, you know, it just feels uncomfortable to not be able to master or control this destiny of the situation. And so that's going to lead to just some angst in eights. And so you just got to know, eights, that's coming, that's okay. This is a time for less, not more.
I've felt on many days just the emotional stress just burning.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be doing anything, but just thinking, and things are churning, and all of a sudden you're just tired.
Right.
Much sooner than you are used to being tired.
Absolutely.
All right, talk to the nines. Advice for the nines.
So nines, the tricky thing for you is quarantine is a little bit easier for you than it is for the other numbers. But the problem is it can get so easy that it can actually take you down into a deep inertia state where you just stop and spiral and kind of hit a wall. So nines, this is a time where it's important for you to do some self-investigation about what are the things in your life that you really want? What are the things in your life that you have put on hold for everybody else or for all the other things that are going on? Is this a season where maybe you as a nine can actually make some goals, can actually think about what do you want your life on the other side of this season to look like? This is a time to attend to that because there are fewer demands on you right now, nines, to just merge with everybody, to just help everybody else like you're usually so good at doing. So this is a time for you, kind of like it is for twos, to say, what do I really want out of life? How can I stop for a minute, make some goals, figure out what my next right action is? Maybe make a few plans for after this season lifts of, do I have a change I want to make? Is there something new and important for me to do? Because otherwise, nines, you can get trapped in your numbing strategies. You can get trapped on a Netflix binge on the couch. And that's fine and that's good. And we're all doing some of that. But nines, you can stay there longer than other numbers and actually miss some of the good things about this quarantine that's opening up some space for you to do some new planning, some new thinking, and some new prioritizing.
So it's a good time for nines to do self-care.
It is a good time. And self-care for nines, it's a fine line between numbing out self-care and taking action, self-care. And so nines, for a lot of numbers, self-care sounds like you need to do less. Nine, sometimes self-care is you need to do more, not for others, but for you, for your own priorities and your own goals. You don't need to do more for everybody else or fix everybody else, but you need to do more for you in this season.
Well, Hunter, that's great advice for all 9 numbers to think about and contemplate as we continue to go through this quarantine time. What else would you add, just kind of in general?
Yeah. In general, I guess the last thing that I would just say in this time is think about the repressed action center for each number. So 1s and 2s and 6s, thinking is repressed. That's kind of in the basement. For 3s and 7s and 8s, it's feeling. And for 4s and 5s and 9s, it's doing. Those are our pathways to spiritual growth in these seasons, is bringing up what's repressed. If you're a 1, 2, or a 6, ask yourself all day long, what am I thinking? Am I thinking about things that are productive and true and helpful, or am I just kind of spiraling in my unproductive, unhelpful thinking? 3s and 7s and 8s, pay attention to feelings a little bit more, yours and the people around you. Access feelings, act on feelings, don't just discount feelings. And 4s and 5s and 9s, this is a season for doing. You have in normal times a lot of undoing times. So maybe this is a good opportunity for 4s and 5s and 9s to do a little bit more, and that will actually help you in this season. So that's kind of my last, tip for us in this is just think about what's in the basement, what's repressed of thinking, feeling, or doing for your number. Think about what does it look like for you to bring it up to make sure that you're not relying on just 2 of those 3 action centers. If you're just relying on feeling and doing, feeling and doing, feeling and doing, you're going to miss a lot of good thinking in this. If you're just relying on thinking and feeling, you're going to miss a lot of good doing. We've just really got to focus on that. And I think that's a good way that we can take care of ourselves in this time.
That's great. I want to thank Hunter Mobley for joining me for this dialogue. I hope you find it helpful to get a better understanding of your personality type, how you can approach this stressful time, and thank you for the good tips that you've given everybody. And who knows how long this will go, but hopefully this will be beneficial and something that you can learn from. I'll give you an air fist bump.
Awesome. Yep. Love it. Thanks, Clay.
Thanks, Hunter.